Welcome to the podcast for Westside, a Jesus Church. We hope this teaching encourages and empowers you to love, learn, and live the way of Jesus.
Ruth 1. I am loving the book of Ruth, and the reason why is I've been studying it and researching it the last few months. I think at the top of the list, I love its unpredictability. This is one of those books that the moment you think you've got it figured out, the moment you think you've got a handle on it, it throws you for a loop. It surprises you. It disarms your assumptions. And I think one of the reasons for that is the way that Ruth begins. If you've read Ruth chapter 1, you know that Ruth begins in a kind of depressing way, just to warn you guys. And I kind of hate to come back and let Ruth 1 be the whole chapter, but it's one of the most depressing chapters in the Bible because virtually everyone dies. It's like Rogue One or something. And there's death, there's weeping, there's a famine, there's all kinds of stuff that's going on. And you read this, it's like, whoa, everything that can go wrong does go wrong. It's like those commercials where they're trying to sell you a prescription or some medicine, and then at the very end, the last 5 seconds, side effects may include difficulty breathing, difficulty swallowing, nausea, vomiting, seizures, death. You're like, I need that medicine. Sounds amazing, right? And this chapter is kind of like the list of side effects. Like, what? Really? All of that happens? It does. But this is what you need to know, is that it's only part of the story. By the end of Ruth, and you got to track with me through Ruth, I'd encourage you, come each week because it's going to get better and better. By the end of the book of Ruth, we're going to see God bring it all together, renewal, redemption, reconciliation. Ruth is a retelling in story form of Romans 8:28. Let's throw that on the screen, Romans 8:28. And could we, as a church, a lot of people here this morning, could we just say this, shout this out, whatever, as a church? Let's speak it over each other's lives. Romans 8:28. Here we go, all together. And we know that in all things God works for the good of those who love him, who have been called according to his purpose. That does not mean that everything in life is going to be perfect. This isn't Lego gospel, everything is awesome. This is saying that because you believe in the God of hope, because we believe in a God of reconciliation and renewal, that even the broken, messed up, flawed areas of our life are someday going to be healed and restored because of Jesus. That's our hope. That's what we cling to. And that is what this book is about. If you're a note taker, just write down the word redemption. And I have you write it down because that is the reoccurring theme all throughout this book, redemption. God making things new. Let's start, verse 1. In the days when the judges ruled, there was a famine in the land. So, a man from Bethlehem in Judah, together with his wife and 2 sons, went to live for a while in the country of Moab. The man's name was Elimelech, his wife's name was Naomi. The names of his 2 sons were Mahlon and Chilion. Sounds like Star Trek or something. They were Ephrathites from Bethlehem, Judah, and they went to Moab to live there. Now, those of you who love history, culture, you'll like this part because we have to hit the pause button and really give a sense of what was happening in the ancient world at this time. The year was 1000 BC. And if you study that period of time, it was a time of tremendous, kind of traumatic cultural change. The Bronze Age had just come to a close. The Zhou dynasty in China was about to begin a 500-year reign that would change the world. They'd invent gunpowder. The Phoenicians developed an alphabetic script. The Egyptian empire was on the brink of collapse. The Mayan civilization was on the brink of power. Israel was a colony of the Persian Empire on the fringes of its territory. You have all of these epic civilizations. You have all of these powers. But what I love about the book of Ruth is God doesn't focus on any of that. Instead, what God does is he zooms in and he says, you know what? I'm going to tell you a simple story about a woman who is living in this obscure town called Bethlehem. And this is a reminder to me, and I love this reminder, that sure, God cares about the big picture, macro stuff. God cares about geopolitics. He cares about running the universe, absolutely. But he also cares about the details. He cares about the mundane. He cares about simple, ordinary things. Jesus said, even the hairs on your head are numbered. Jesus, he is with you, not just in the mountaintops of life, but he's here with us in the valleys. And this is important because we can become junkies for the experiential, junkies for the supernatural. Okay, I'm just waiting for the next big thing. I'm just waiting for the next miracle. I'm just waiting for the next mountaintop. I'm waiting for God to just show up in some radical way. Well, that's beautiful when it happens, but our God is not only the God of the mountain, he's the God of the valley too. And this God is with you when you're stuck in traffic on Highway 99, like you do, right? He's here with you when you're at home washing dishes. He is with you when you're standing in line holding a box of paper towels at Costco. God is with you in the ordinary things. Brothers and sisters, Ruth is about the God of the ordinary. That's how stories are written. It's ordinary people doing extraordinary things. Who are these people? Well, look down in verse 2. We see who. It says there was a man named Elimelech, Naomi, and their two sons, Mahlon and Chilion. Now, in the Bible, a person's name is so significant. In the ancient Near East, when you, as a parent, named your kid, you would name your kids based on what you saw in them, the trajectory that you wanted them to go. Many times the giving of a name was prophetic. You, by giving them that name, was saying something about who they are, what they would become, and their future. Now, I'm a parent, and we often name our kids because we like the sound of the name, right? So my daughter's name is Amelia Kalia Doan. Now, backstory to that, those of you who know me well, you know that Portland's a great place for me because I'm a foodie. I love food. There's really nothing I don't like. Sometimes when I meet with people or go over to someone's house, they'll ask me, hey, is there anything you can't eat? And sure, I can pretty much eat it all, but there is one food that I don't like. Sweet potatoes. I don't know if anyone else is with me on this. I think sweet potatoes, yes, I see that hand. Sweet potatoes, I think, are demonic. I think there's a whole biblical reason. Like you go to the book of Genesis when Satan tempted Eve in the Hebrew, it's sweet potato. That's a whole nother sermon, right? So I despise them. I really do. I despise them. Now, my wife, Elisa, on the other hand, is a huge fan of them. And when I say fan, she's passionate, seriously, passionate about sweet potatoes. She puts them in anything, everything. Quinoa bowls, salad, she'll put it in coffee, whatever. She loves sweet potatoes. She has a tattoo of a sweet potato on her arm. Ask her about it. So this is our marriage, right? And sometimes my wife, she'll try and trick me. She'll make something. It tastes great. When I'm done, she's like, what do you think? Oh, it's wonderful. I put a sweet potato in there, right? It's like all part of her plan. So back to Amelia. 12 years ago, she's born. We give her the name Amelia Kalia Doan. Kalia, we lived in Hawaii at the time. Kalia is a Hawaiian name. I just love the name of it. I love the sound. We bring Amelia back to our church, and people are meeting her. And a Hawaiian friend of mine, he's like, hey, Pastor, do you know what Kalia means? It's Hawaiian. Do you know what it means? I'm like, no. Sweet potato. So this is all part of my wife's evil, demonic plan. So pray for me, right? It's spiritual warfare. So names matter. And now I have this walking reminder of a sweet potato, and we can't change it. In the ancient world, what you called your kids mattered. So what about these names? Let's throw it on the screen. Elimelech, that's a great name, means my God is king. Wow, that's awesome. Naomi means just sweet, not sweet potato. Sweet. Now check this out. Mahlon in the Hebrew means sickly or weakling. And Kilion, even worse, means crybaby or dying. So I'm studying this. I'm trying to wrap my mind around it. Why, as a parent, would you call your kids this? In a culture where names matter, it's the 4 minutes. You turn around and you meet someone new that you didn't come with. Hi, my name's Bob, and these are my sons. This is Asian bird flu and walking pneumonia. Hashtag awkward West Side moments, right? Why would you do this? Well, here's why. If you go back to verse 1, the very first line, it says, there was a famine in the land. Names matter. What you call your kids matter. What you call your kids reflects what's happening. So they call their kids, okay, sickly, crybaby, because, well, they're undernourished. And like any good parent, they're like, we got to figure this out. We got to take our kids somewhere where they can have a future. So what do? Well, verse 2, it says they took them to Moab. Now, Moab in the ancient world was one of the most dark and spiritually oppressive places imaginable. They worshiped this god called Chemosh. And if you worship the god Chemosh, it involved sacrifice of children. It included weird, deviant, perverse sexual activity. The worship of the god Chemosh, and you can check out history on this, was rampant in Moab. It was a dark place. And yet it shows their desperation. They were so hungry. They're malnourished. Okay, fine, we'll take them to Moab. Which, by the way, if I could just say this to those of you who are parents, you got to think through where you raise your kids. You got to think through what environment you put them in. It's going to make a difference in their life. And they take them to Moab, and no sooner do they get there, look at verse 3, Elimelech, Naomi's husband, died, and she was left with her 2 sons. They married Moabite women, one named Orpah and the other Ruth. And after they had lived there about 10 years, both Mahlon and Kilion also died. And Naomi was left without her 2 sons and her husband. Now, this is the worst possible scenario, not only because of the obvious, right? Naomi's husband dies and her 2 sons die. There's obvious personal suffering here that's going on, but there's something cultural that's going on that you need to know. In the ancient Near East, it was an agrarian culture, and what that meant is that men were the primary breadwinners. They would be out working the fields, they'd be out protecting the land from invaders. What that meant culturally back then, thousands of years ago, is that if you were married, you were dependent on your husband for survival. What happens if your husband dies? Well, that's why there's such an emphasis, you'll see in ancient texts like the Bible, an emphasis on sons. Because, well, if my husband dies, the sons will step up and they'll provide for me too. So this is the worst possible scenario for Naomi because now her husband's gone, she's a widow, and she has no means of provision. She has no means of taking care of herself. This is a time in her life where everything is taken from her. Have you ever been in a season in life where that is the case? I met with someone last week who recently lost their job. As a byproduct of that, they lost their house. And now they're in a situation of they have nothing. They're trying to figure out what to do. Have you ever been in a situation where something you work on, dream about, run towards, is then stripped from you? I met with someone else last week who they've been married for 14 years, and then suddenly a surprise, oh, he had an affair, and now a divorce. What do I do with that? Have you ever been in a season where everything in your life has been stripped from you? In May, I had a chance to go to Uganda, and in Uganda, you guys, y'all, are helping to support all different kinds of homes and ministries, which, by the way, thank you. I can't thank you enough. Because of your giving, because of your tithes, this money, we're seeing God use it in incredible ways throughout the world. I'd never been to Africa, and I wanted to go, and I wanted to get first eyes on, okay, what is God doing through Westside, through you guys, and what are some stories that I can share? A home that you guys built called the Bakoto Home is a home for women who have been rescued from sexual exploitation, devastation, and brokenness. So I went, there's a team of us pastors, we go to the Bakoto Home, I took this picture, and this is just a small sample of the girls, the women that were in the room, ranging in age from 10 up to early 20s. And I'm hearing stories. I'm hearing stories of what they've been through. As one after one, they open up and share, it was devastating. One girl, one of these four, she shared how her parents had died. She was then raped by a family member. She was left homeless for a season. She had nowhere to go. And because of you guys, because of your generosity, she heard about this home, and now she's finding healing. She's finding restoration. She's finding renewal. And we're hearing each of these stories, and have you ever been in a situation in life where the hallmark answers don't cut it? Have you ever been in a time you're sitting down with someone who's devastated because of a breakup? There's no cute Christian-y thing to say at that point, right? Romans 12 says, weep with those who weep. Rejoice with those who rejoice. There's another poet, and I love this quote. He says, when your fear touches someone's pain, it becomes pity. But when your love touches someone's pain, it becomes compassion. Have you ever been in that place where you don't know what to say, but you can weep with those who weep? And what I saw happen in this room, I'm just in tears. All the other guys are in tears. These women are in tears as they're hearing story after story of loss, but we also saw, like that poet said, love and compassion because they shared the story. And then I saw the other women would get up and gather around the girl who had just shared, and they're all weeping, but laying hands on them and then speaking hope and promise and favor and the joy and blessing of God. It was the most beautiful, moving experience I've had in a long time. And I share that with you because in those seasons of life, sure, there's no easy answer, but you can also see love and compassion, and you can see redemption. And in this story that starts so much like a Rogue One where everyone dies, we're going to see the beauty of God and the healing of God and the favor of God being poured out on these women who are left. And their life is going to be put back together. Check out verse 6. Naomi, she heard in Moab that the Lord had come to the aid of his people by providing food for them. And she and her daughters-in-law prepared to return home from there. With her 2 daughters-in-law, she left the place where she had been living, and she set out on the road that would take them back to the land of Judah. Then Naomi said to her 2 daughters-in-law, go back, each of you, to your mother's home. May the Lord show you kindness as you've shown kindness to your dead husbands and to me. May the Lord grant that each of you will find rest in the home of another husband. And she kissed them goodbye, and they wept aloud. And they said to her, we will go back with you to your people. But Naomi said, return home, my daughters. Why would you come with me? Am I going to have any more sons who could become your husbands? Return home, my daughters. I am too old to have another husband. Even if I thought there was still hope for me, even if I had a husband tonight and then gave birth to sons, would you wait until they grew up? No, because that would be weird, right? Would you remain unmarried for them? No, my daughters, it is more bitter for me than for you, because the Lord's hand is turned against me. At this, they wept aloud again, and Orpah kissed her mother-in-law goodbye. But Ruth clung to her. Circle that word clung, it's huge. Ruth clung to her. Look, said Naomi, your sister-in-law is going back to her people, and her gods go back with her. Oh my gosh. Talking about an emotional scene. Like, have you ever read a book or seen a movie that just catches you off guard and you just find tears coming to your eyes. You probably think I'm dumb for this, but the movie Up is that way for me. Is there anyone else in the same camp? I've seen it many times, but the first 10 minutes wrecks me. Or last week I saw Dunkirk. Oh my goodness, masterpiece. If you haven't seen it, amazing movie. And there are times like, just it pulls on your heart. This is one of those uber emotional scenes. It's what the Greeks called pathos, right? It's when they open a window to another story. It's an invitation to feel, not just see, but to feel things from someone else's perspective. My daughters, Naomi says to her daughters-in-law, my daughters, I'm going back home. But you need to stay. You're Moabite. This is your land. These are your people. Start a new life. Get married. Have kids. There's nothing more that I can give you. And look at how they respond. Orpah, she's like, okay. She kisses Naomi, and she returns back home. But Ruth clung to her. The word clung in the Hebrew language is the word dabka. Can I hear you say dabka? And it's such an important word. It's so emotive. It's so passionate. It means you're holding on to something or someone so tightly that nothing or no one can get in the way. Dabka is the moment when you hold your newborn for the very first time. Dabka is when you're at the airport and you see the person step into the crowd and you haven't seen them for years and you hold them close. Dabka is how most of us feel about coffee, right? There's some things I'm not letting go. And this is Ruth. She's clinging to her mother-in-law. And then you have some of the most beautiful verses, I think, in Scripture, and have been said at so many weddings too. Ruth replied, don't urge me to leave you or turn back from you. Where you go, I will go. Where you stay, I will stay. Your people will be my people. Your God, my God. Where you die, I will die. And there I will be buried. May the Lord deal with me, be it ever so severely, if even death separates you and me. And when Naomi realized that Ruth was determined to go with her, she stopped urging her. After a speech like that, you're like, okay, you're coming. So the two women went on until they came to Bethlehem. When they arrived in Bethlehem, the whole town was stirred because of them, and the woman exclaimed, can this be Naomi? Check out these verses. Don't call me Naomi, she told them. Call me Mara, because the Almighty has made my life very bitter. I went away full, but the Lord has brought me back empty. Why call me Naomi? The Lord has afflicted me. The Almighty has brought misfortune upon me. So Naomi returned from Moab, accompanied by Ruth the Moabite, her daughter-in-law, arriving in Bethlehem as the barley harvest was beginning. I warned you that this was a sad chapter, right? Oh my goodness. Virtually everyone dies. She gets back and she gives this whole speech about, is that Naomi? Yeah, but don't call me Naomi. I'm not sweet anymore. You just call me Mara, which means bitter. God took everything from me. I mean, this is so emo, this chapter, right? It's so dark. Like, it makes me want to go home, block out the curtains, put on Depeche Mode, get a tattoo of Eeyore. Like, that's kind of this space, this chapter. Wow. But this is what you need to know. A couple things. First of all, real quick, and this could be a whole nother sermon. There's still hope. The last line of Ruth chapter 1 says, and the barley harvest was coming. It starts with famine. It ends with hope. Okay, there's something to look forward to here. God is going to provide. And that may be simply the word for you today. But I'm unemployed, yes, but a barley harvest is coming. But I'm going through a breakup, but a barley harvest is coming. I'm struggling with that addiction, but a barley harvest is coming. I feel distant in my relationship with God, but a barley harvest is coming. Westside, a harvest is coming. God is working. He will provide. He will come through. But I want you to notice what happens before then. You have two women with virtually the same story. They're both from Moab. They both marry into the same family. They both have the same mother-in-law. They both lost their husbands. They're both in a season of grief. They're both in the same story. But notice there's two different reactions. Orpah says, okay, I'll stay. I'm going back to Moab. I'm going back to the old life. And it says, and her gods too. I'm going back to Chemosh. I'm going back to how I used to do things. But Ruth says, no. No matter what the cost, no matter the uncertainty, no matter the pain, I'm clinging to you. I'm not letting go of you. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Mikasa sukasa. No matter what, I am with you every step of the way. There are two responses when life is hard. There are two different stories when difficulty happens. There are two reactions when you go through struggle. Jesus in John chapter 6, he shows us the same thing. Just write it down if you want. John chapter 6, it says Jesus, he's preaching. It was the height of his ministry. I mean, thousands of people. The beginning says that there were 5,000 people of men, plus women and children. That's 20,000 people. Mega church. All these people. Excitement, buzz, enthusiasm. That's the beginning of John 6. But you keep reading John 6, what happens? Jesus starts to talk about death. He starts to talk about the cross. He talks about sacrifice. And one of the darkest verses in Scripture, John 6, verse 66. Interesting number, John 6:66. And it says, when they heard what Jesus said, they turned and they stopped following him. And Jesus looked at his group, which was now substantially smaller, his disciples, and he said, will you turn away too? Will you stop following me? And what does Peter say? No. Where else can I go, Lord? You alone have the words of eternal life. I don't know what this looks like. I don't know where this is all going, Jesus, but I am with you. There are two kinds of people when life is hard. Which one are you? Every one of us right now, we're clinging to something. And what happens is when you go through the trial, when you go through the fire, it forces you to hold on to that thing even more. Because Jesus said in this world, you will face tribulation, right? It's going to happen. There's going to be hardship. The word tribulation that Jesus used there is the word thlipsis. Thlipsis in Greek was a form of Roman torture. What would they do? They would take the prisoner, they would lay them on the ground, they would take a heavy boulder and roll it on top of the prisoner. They were gasping for breath. That was how they tortured people. Jesus said, in this world, you will face thlipsis. Some of you are in that space right now. You come in this room and your heart's heavy. It's like someone just rolled a boulder on top of your chest. Others of you, it feels like you're gasping for breath. You don't know what the next week holds. You don't know how you're going to get through this trial, this fire, this difficulty. And in your hands right now, you have two options, you have two paths. There's something you're clinging onto. It's what I like to call a functional Messiah. What is that? Where am I going to go when life is hard? Where am I going to go when the burden is on me? I met with a guy a few days ago, right when I got back, went through a horrific ordeal, and for him, he's gone back to Moab. He's gone back. For him, it was an addiction to gambling. All right, that's where I'm going. But I know that, and I see some of you in this room, your story is Ruth. Because you've gone through horrible things. You've gone through divorce. You've gone through unemployment. You've gone through addiction. But like Ruth, you're saying, I'm not leaving you, God. Your people will be my people. Your God will be my God. Where you go, I will go. There will I be buried. Who are you clinging to today? Who are you putting your hope in? Because what you will find is if it's the gods of Moab, if it's Chemosh, if it's some website, if it's some addiction, if it's alcohol abuse, if it's drug use, if it's some dysfunctional relationship, listen, you go back down that path and the gods of Moab are going to do nothing but disappoint. Sure, they'll give you pleasure, but they'll leave you more empty than ever. They may distract you, but they're not going to deepen you. It may numb the pain. I just want to numb the pain, but it's not going to heal the pain. Tim Keller, in his book, Counterfeit Gods, he has this line. I recommend this book. It's so good. He says, an idol is something that we look to for things that only God can give. If we look to it to give us meaning, hope, and happiness that only God himself can give, it will eventually fail to deliver, and it will break our hearts. Don't go back to the gods of Moab. But I'm burdened down. Yes. But you cling to Jesus, you come to Jesus, the author and the finisher of your faith. And he who began a good work in you is going to be faithful to complete it. God will not abandon what he has begun. But I'm just distressed, I'm hurting, I'm broken, I'm lonely. You'll be even more broken and lonely if you go back. That's why Jesus told the woman at the well in John chapter 4, he says, if you drink of these waters, you will thirst again. But if you drink of the waters that I give, you will never thirst again. And then he said, hey, go get your husband and bring him back. And her response was technically true. I don't have a husband. And Jesus said, well, okay, but you've had 5 husbands and you're sleeping with a guy who isn't your husband. Talk about awkward. And I love her response. It's so Christian-y. She says, sir, I perceive you're a prophet. Right? If you want to get out of anything, just use that line. Wow. And she goes back, and it says she told the men of the city. She's like, well, been with a lot of you guys. I'll just tell you all. There's a guy out here. You need to see him. And it says the guys like ran out. They're probably wondering, what does he know? And there was a revival. You know the story. But she asked him in that conversation, she said, where can I get this living water? And he says, I am that living water. It's me. It's me. Jesus said, come to me when you're weary and burdened down, and you will find rest for your soul. And I think there's some in here today, you're clinging to Jesus. Keep doing it. Others, you've gone back, and you know it. And Jesus is calling you today to come and find your satisfaction in him. He calls you to the waters, these waters. It's why we do baptisms every month. To come and find healing and renewal and refreshment and joy and liberation and freedom, because he who the Son sets free shall be free indeed. You can be free today. But what about the mess? Come to Jesus, let him sort it out. But I don't see a way forward. Yes, but there's a word called redemption. But I don't know how all things work together for the good. But I'm in a famine, but a harvest is coming. But I don't see God in the midst of this. Well, you'll see by the end of Ruth that Jesus was born because of this. Do you know that Ruth is in the genealogy of Jesus? Jesus is going to be born in your situation. And today, many of you have a choice. Who are you going to cling to? Where are you going to go? And Jesus says, come to me and be set free.